Alliance for a Green Revolution in Africa.
Thank you for those introductory remarks. Distinguished partners, panelists, our audience, ladies and gentlemen, we are pleased you're able to join us on this Farmers Forum today. It's part of a series of conversations that we have initiated since we started the Food Systems Summit, but it's also part of the work that we do as AGRA, putting farmers forward and putting farmers first and ensuring that the work that we do and the development of the continent is anchored around farmers. AGRA, the institution I lead, has done a lot of work in trying to ensure that farmers have access to what they need to be able to have productive farming, to be able to farm as businesses. We focus on advancing functional systems for the agricultural sector to ensure that farmers and private sector have a working environment for input systems, but also a good policy environment to ensure that governments and other institutions have the support they need to be able to advance this. This particular forum will speak to sustainable agriculture in the wake of climate change, recognizing the need for resilience and the need for adaptation to climate change, but also recognizing the interconnectedness of agricultural systems to climate change and the fact that our continent specifically, will not advance unless we make progress on climate change. Yes, it's true, we contribute very little to climate change, but climate change is definitely defining our lives, and we have to be part of ensuring that the world understands how climate change is impacting smallholder farmers. But we also want to make sure that the work we do does not contribute to climate change. This work also will recognize what is happening under the AU CAADP Marabou commitment and towards the Sustainable Development Goals of Food Systems Summit that I lead is now working on, recognizing fully well that in both areas, the Marabou commitments and Sustainable Development Goals, we are behind on some of the most critical areas on zero hunger, on nutrition and malnutrition, but also on climate change, like I just said. We are contributing to biodiversity loss. 80% biodiversity loss comes from agricultural systems, and agricultural systems are contributing 30% to climate change. So let's focus on ensuring that these frameworks that we had already put in place from an African continent perspective, but also from a global perspective, let's focus on ensuring that these frameworks work. And more importantly, let's focus on ensuring that they work for smallholder farmers. Lastly, I want to recognize that this is a time to build back better. I want to recognize that our smallholder farmers have been challenged just like everybody else in our community. Use the opportunity that the Food Systems Summit is offering and be able to double down on efforts that will ensure equity, will ensure better livelihoods, and will ensure better incomes for smallholder farmers. I want to appreciate the work that farmers do, but I also want to appreciate the Farmers Forum as the opportunity that we have and farmers have to bring issues to the attention of all stakeholders, to bring issues to the forefront, and to bring the issues that the continent is struggling with, from ending hunger, from equity, from challenges that face women and youth employment, which is a big challenge on our continent, the opportunity that we have in our midst right now is to bring these issues to the fore. And no group of people is more credible than the Farmers Forum to present these issues on behalf of farmers.
All right. So as we said, these are issues that are affecting farmers. That is what we are discussing on this edition of the Nation Leadership Forum. And on that note, I have two farmers with me this evening. One of them is based in Eldoret, and her name is Ruth Maraba. Ruth, happy to have you with us this evening. We're also joined by Arthur Nsubuga. I hope I said it right, Arthur, and he is joining us all the way from Uganda.
No,
I am in Nairobi, in case I didn't mention it. We also have Dr. Geoffrey Kirenga, who's joining us from Tanzania, and he is the CEO of SAG Court. All right, there we have it. Those are our three panelists this evening. We're expecting a fourth. I will introduce him when he becomes available to us. This is the first of two sessions that are taking place this evening. The second one will take place at 7:30 p.m. on NTV Kenya and NTV Uganda from 8 p.m. So do stay tuned for that as well. And I will be handing that baton over to my colleague, Smriti Vidyarthi. But first, let's get the ball rolling. Ruth, what has dominated, I think, the last year is the COVID pandemic. How has the COVID pandemic treated you as a farmer?
Thank you so much. COVID-19 pandemic has really threatened Africans' food security, and it has really given a lot of challenges to the farmers. It has made food a very rare commodity, especially when it comes to the chain value of the food commodities in our regions. So, because at times when transporting the food to the market, it's a bit tricky. So, if COVID-19 has really impacted so much in our farmers. So, we always think of climate change and COVID-19. So, personally, I've seen a lot of people suffering when it comes to COVID-19 pandemic, and it has really affected Africans' food system and the livelihoods of the farmers in our region.
All right, thank you, Ruth. Arthur, Ruth introduced the aspect of climate change. How has climate change impacted you as a farmer and your community?
I think the biggest challenge with climate change on our side, of course, is the unpredictable weather. It's been difficult to determine when to plant crops. So you find that farmers on many fronts end up planting maybe just way before the rains and end up losing the seed. And seed is quite expensive. So if you plant way before the rain and you can't determine when the rain will come in, you lose that expensive seed. So you find the farmers have made losses because of depending on when the rain will come. And of course, even the weather predictions sometimes have been very inaccurate. Either you have a very long dry season or you have a very long wet season. So the problem with a long wet season is that you can't, you essentially lose your crop. It can't, because it needs a bit of warmth to mature, but end up losing your crop because there's not enough warmth for the crop to mature and so they can be able to take it to the market. So that unpredictable weather has been very difficult for the farmers in Uganda. And of course, irrigation is still a big issue in the country because of the cost of irrigation equipment within the country, especially for smallholder farmers. You would find that lining up an acre of land for irrigation can be too expensive for your typical smallholder farmer. So the weather is unpredictable, and also the mechanisms to mitigate the risks are also still a bit unaffordable for the typical smallholder farmer.
All right, thank you, Arthur. And I'd like to bring in Geoffrey at this point. Geoffrey, you're in Tanzania. What does the situation look like there? Because we've not only had to contend with the impacts of climate change, like Arthur mentioned, unpredictable rain patterns, but we've had to deal with the COVID pandemic, which led to the closure of markets. We've also had to deal with the locust invasion. What is the situation like in Tanzania?
Thank you very much for this opportunity. The situation in Tanzania is not very different from other countries, but I can say as far as climate change is concerned, the farmers are also affected. Although Tanzania has been able to have a very good harvest for a couple of years now, almost a decade and more, we are producing more than what we are consuming, but still there are other products which we are importing from outside. However, on the issue of unpredictability of weather, that is a challenge. We see that it is difficult for farmers to manage their cropping calendars as they used to do in the past. But also we see maybe rainfall finishing or the cycle of rain completing its cycle before the crop has matured. As far as the pandemic is concerned, Tanzania did not experience lockdown as other countries. Therefore, we did most of the agricultural production as we have always been doing it, but we see the importance now to make sure that all the advice that you are given is adhered to. At the moment, we are now implementing social distancing, also staying clean, but also we have started the vaccination campaign in the country. And if you have noticed recently, we have also started to publish data on the situation in Tanzania. There is an impact economically, especially for the agricultural sector. We saw the horticultural industry be the one which is most affected, and also the closure and also suspension of services in various institutions, especially the tourist sector, that has caused a number of challenges, especially in the suppliers of livestock and crops that are normally consumed in those tourist cycles and other urban areas. But that's what I can say at the moment. We see also levels of investments going down, also affected by this. It's difficult now to do investment as compared to what used to be in the past, which of course was not in good state, but this situation has worsened the situation that was also not very good even before the pandemic. But what I can say, it's important to notice these problems, and we're putting measures now to correct the situation.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Kirenga. And speaking of measures to correct this situation, Ruth, the unpredictable weather patterns are not limited to Uganda, because that is an issue that Arthur raised. As a farmer, how are you adapting to these unpredictable weather patterns?
Yeah, in Kenya, farmers actually had to adapt because climate change constitute a significant threat to food security and even poverty reduction in Kenya. So food system is severely off-targeted in meeting development, and it has really affected our farmers. And the government has really tried so much. You have come up with so many policies. We are coming up with a lot of capacity building workshops for the farmers because climate change is becoming real now. We used to tell our farmers to plant trees. We used to tell our farmers so many things. But currently, they have seen it, they have accepted it, and they have really known that climate change is real. It has affected our food groups because whenever they were planting to plant food groups, it became a bit bad because they could not do that. The pattern changed. We used to plant other food crops like beans. And currently, we don't have any beans in Kenya. So climate change has really affected so many farmers, especially in the North Rift region and part of the South Rift region of Kenya.
All right, thank you, Ruth. Arthur, come in at this point. How are you coping with these? There's been flooding. You mentioned, as I keep repeating, the issue of unpredictable rain patterns. How are you coping on your end?
If I'm speaking for myself, one thing that I do as a farmer, of course, I have an irrigation scheme, but of course, like I mentioned, that is quite expensive for a typical farmer. So, but something else I'm doing is that I'm trying to diversify my farming because I plant coffee and I plant bananas, but I've also had to plant a forest on my farm because that's one of my simple contributions to kind of reversing climate change, and it's something that I'm trying to encourage people to do to get into reforestation. But also, it's important for even for the smallholder farmers to find out optimizing their land, as in they need to include more than just food crops on their small land. I mean, if you could do some bit of reforestation or adding a bit of a tree cover on your land, that helps to also, in a small way, as a reverse climate change. Because we have a lot of smallholder farmers. You can imagine if all these millions of smallholder farmers could do just a little bit of tree planting on their pieces of land, that can aggregate to reverse the situation. So it's something that I'm trying to encourage people to do, to get into reforestation, but also to optimize their pieces of land in such a way that can be more productive. I mean, if they can't afford irrigation systems, they can afford to mulch their banana plantations, for example. They can do so many things to deal with the adverse weather if they can't really afford irrigation. So I'm encouraging optimization of pieces of land and reforestation.
All right, thank you, Arthur. And Dr. Kirenga, let me bring you in at that point. Arthur has raised some of the ways that we can address climate change, for example, reforestation, diversification of the crops we plant. What are some of the other technologies and adaptive strategies that we can employ to address the challenges of climate change?
Thank you. I will respond to your questions by looking at two things. First of all is the technologies that, and the second issue is the systems approach that you're putting in place. One of the areas, let me start with the systems approach. Actually, in my organization, we are working with the government, the development partners, and the private sector to develop a system whereby we work under the public-private partnerships, whereby the public investment is directed towards promoting measures such as infrastructure, building and repairing, climate change. You mentioned floods, they can damage the roads and things of that nature, to make sure that crops and inputs will go into and out of the farms. We also work with the government to make sure that technologies such as improved seeds that can withstand the climate change is much more available to the government, by government putting measures that can put that seed in the market, but also research and development to develop them. And we are also working with the private sector to make sure that the private sector do invest in inclusive development. And we have worked with them to develop what we call the Inclusive Green Growth Initiative in Tanzania, whereby we have put up measures which have put together all the technological issues which is needed to combat issues of climate change and other challenges that farmers are facing. And these measures looks on things like how can you judiciously use inputs, but also you can control pests and diseases. And also we are looking on the measures of looking at the soil, because everything starts with the soil. So issues of soil health is very important. We are teaching farmers how to conserve the organic matter content, but also measures like using soil correcting inputs, especially liming where there's soil acidity, and gypsum where you have soil salinity, and planting densities, and also issues of judicious use of water, water saving technologies. All these are being promoted, and it's very important to say that it's not only being promoted in the medium and large scale farmers, but we have found ways to connect farmers with those technologies. Companies are encouraging to invest and distribute these technologies to farmers. There you are also creating businesses to those companies, but also we are encouraging private sector to train smallholder farmers in public-private partnership arrangements. And this has been working very effectively. Actually, I can say, if you look at a crop like maize, which is very important, especially in the Southern Highlands, we have discovered that if you take care of your soil and you make sure that your soil is healthy, that is as important measure, because it actually triple your productivity in that particular area. And also it empowers or it enables the crop to survive and escape climate change challenges. Let me stop here, and I will wait for any other opportunity to contribute more on this.
All right, thank you, Dr. Kirenga. I can understand why you're so passionate about this topic, and you do understand quite a bit about it. I did mention, and I did promise that we'd have a fourth panelist with us tonight, and that is the ED and the CEO of the East African Business Council, and that is John Bosco. Good to have you with us on set. John Bosco, my question to you is this. Why is this an important conversation to have? I know smallholder farmers are about, 7 out of 10 of the farmers on the continent. Agriculture is the backbone of many an economy. Why is it important to have this conversation as regards climate change and how it affects them?
Yeah, thank you very much. And thanks for organizing this national dialogue. Yeah, it is important to talk about the resilience, especially in our farming sector, given its importance in our livelihood, given its importance in our economy. When you look at the statistics, the agriculture sector contributes around 35% of our GDP, and it employs a substantial number of our people, especially both rural and urban. So before the COVID, it was one of the dynamic sector we had in the region. So discussing the resilience and sustainability of this sector is very critical in terms of building our capabilities, the regional and national capabilities, in terms of how
do we reshape and refocus our value chain at the national level and at the regional level. When you look at the sector itself, it has what we call both backward and forward linkages. It has a positive trickle-down effects to other sectors of the economy, both the light manufacturing and including even services. So it is really a critical sector that we need to reflect and review its performance as well as how the system works, from the both smallholder farmers to the processors, distributors, even to the final consumers, because each segment of the society is affected by this sector. So I think it is very critical and important that we look at, we build back the sector and look at what we did well and what is its strength as well as its weaknesses, and how can we support the sector in terms of building its resilience.
All right, thank you, John. I'd like to bring back Ruth. John, we have two farmers on board. We have Ruth in Eldoret and we have Arthur in Uganda. Ruth, you represent a federation of farmers, and there are these technologies that Dr. Kirenga made reference to, talking about why it's important to address soil, right, and how water is used and access to seeds that can withstand the effects of climate change. How accessible have these technologies been to your members?
Thank you, Madam. In my federation, that is Kenya National Farmers Federation, we decided to come up with a target. We targeted, we want to plant 50 billion trees by the year 2030, and we have worked with the government. We have ensured that any farmer in our federation plants trees in his garden. If he has more than 10 acres, he is allowed to plant almost 10,000 trees in his or her farm. So from that, we realized that it can make a lot of impact, a lot of deforestation will reduce. And even secondly, we as a federation, we decided to support the small-scale farmers to plant trees even in their compounds, even in their yards. And at the end of the day, we realized it's going to make a lot of impact. So as per our previous planting, because of the target, we realized that we can even achieve the 50 billion trees before the year 2030. And because climate change is real, our farmers are even supporting this through the partnerships. Everybody is willing even to buy. And at times, some have come up with a strategy that if you are 20 years, you plant 20 seedlings. If you are 50 years, so you just plant as per your age. And we realize that it has made a lot of impact because people enjoy seeing trees. People know that trees are lives, and it makes a lot of impact at the end of the day. Those areas which have not been raining for some time has really done so well because of the trees plantation and even the coming up of seedlings. In my federation, it is group-based, it's non-political, and most of the groups have decided to come up with tree nurseries. And we have seen a lot of impact because even purchasing of seedlings is becoming a bit cheaper. And those ones who have tree nurseries are assisting the other groups who are not stable. So it has made a lot of impact. And from the look of things, before the year 2030, our country will have been covered by the trees in those years.
All right. Arthur, let me bring you in at that point. How accessible is this? Are these technologies to you in terms of, I know you said you're diversifying your crops, there's reforestation, but there are also all these other inputs that Dr. Kirenga made reference to: access to seed, access to fertilizer, access to credit. I was just looking at some statistics, and when I visited the AGRA website, and I saw that despite the agriculture sector contributing, I think, John, you said 35% yes. to the GDP, they get less than 10% private lending. How accessible is credit to you, for instance?
I love talking about credit because it's one of my passions, and I get to do a bit of work on the side in that credit industry. Credit for the small smallholder farmer is still a big problem in Uganda. We have facilities that are sponsored by the development partners, credit facilities. But the challenge is that they're designed for what I'll call the midstream of the value chain. They're designed for processors. They're designed for off-takers of the crops. They're designed for people who are into packaging the crop. So they have terms and conditions which a typical farmer upcountry can't manage. For example, you can't ask a typical farmer to come up with physical collateral. So because of such terms and conditions, these farmers miss out on this credit. The other thing is that this credit is disbursed through commercial banks, which don't necessarily reach the farmers who are typically off-grid. So the farmers miss out on this credit. Because they miss out on this credit, they're not able to afford what you can call quality seeds, even quality fertilizers, because quality comes with a premium. It comes with a cost. So if you can't get good credit, that means you can't get good seeds and good fertilizers. So credit starts this business, and credit can kill this business. That's what it is. So the typical off-grid farmer misses out on these facilities. So there's need for the government to rethink the design of these facilities. And they need to involve the farmers or get down to the ground and see what are the challenges that these farmers actually face, because they don't own, most of them don't even own land. So you can't ask me for a land title as collateral to give me credit when I don't have a land title. Most of them are on communal land. You can't get a land title for communal land. So they miss on these facilities because of those hardships of theirs, but also the facilities are not designed. They're missing that element of catering for that farmer who won't afford to have the collateral. So we end up missing out on that credit. So we can't afford the quality seeds. We can't afford the quality irrigation systems because we can't get that credit from the financial institutions.
All right, thank you, Arthur. And let me bring in Dr. Kirenga at that point. What opportunities then are there for the public and the private sector, for instance, to where access to credit is concerned? I know your organization, the Southern, is it Growth Corridor of Tanzania? Yeah, Southern Agricultural Growth Corridor of Tanzania is a public, as you mentioned, private-public partnership initiative. So what opportunities for collaboration are there in where access to credit is concerned, where access to those seeds you mentioned earlier is concerned, where access to fertilizer is concerned? I know AGRA deals with consortia. Let me just bring it back to that main question. What opportunities for partnership are there?
Thank you very much. Actually, we have just concluded that these issues of accessing finance in agriculture are major challenges. And there is no way that the government alone will solve it, neither the private sector alone, and neither the financial institutions alone. There is need to create specific partnerships through initiatives like AGRA, but also looking at what is it that the financial institutions are doing in order to facilitate that. We have explored this, and this is what we have done. Normally, in the agricultural sector, you will find that the financial literacy on the side of the production side, where that's where you find most of the farmers, is not that good, as not at the level that is expected. Likewise, issues of agriculture are not well known on the side of the financial institutions. Therefore, what we have been doing is championing partnerships. We collaborate with partners like AGRA to bring together the government, the private sector, and see what is it that we can do together. And we have brought in and developed an initiative which we call Financial Innovation Tools for Agriculture. And that's where people will meet and discuss what needs to be done. And once that is done, you'll find that those participating from the agriculture side will be more informed on what is being provided on the financial side. And in the financial side, they will discover what opportunities are there in the value chain, various value chains. We go to specific value chains, and it is quite interesting to see how many opportunities can be unlocked by just sharing information. That's one example. But of course, another example is to talk to the government and see what kind of measures can be put in order to facilitate the banks to lend more and other financial institutions, but also what measures can be put in place to de-risk the sector and make it more attractive for investment. And when it comes to individual investment, you will definitely see things like most of the farmers and farm organizations have no skills and capacities to develop those somehow complicated proposals that will be funded by financial institutions, and those institutions which provide services that de-risks investment in the agricultural sector. And therefore BDS, this is what we call business development services, becomes important. And those ones normally work with a small and medium businesses, including small and individual farmers. This is becoming instrumental in unlocking financial opportunities to farmers. But also now we're expanding that, especially on the side of the youth, seeing what technologies are there that can be useful. Actually, sometimes they need small levels of credit to facilitate their investment. And that's an area where there's a lot of dynamism, especially through the use of technologies.
All right. So thank you for bringing in the youth. And John, I'll come to you with the youth just now. But I'm told we also have an audience on Zoom. It is the era of, as I said, it is the digital era and the era of Zoom. So I don't know whether we can see them. I see lots of you have turned off your cameras. Does anybody have their camera on and they can wave at us? Perhaps. I'm waving at you. I know you can see me. Anybody with their camera on and they can wave? Oh, there we go. Wave at us. Yeah, awesome. So you can, via your chat capability, you can text in questions that you have and contributions to the conversation. It'll be fed to me. I have a little earphone in my ear, and I'll get that information too. So do share your thoughts. If you have, we will get to them. All right. And Rwanda, my apologies. I left you out. We are also joined by an audience in Rwanda. Thank you very much for making the time to join this conversation. All right, John, and there's a question I asked Dr. Kirenga, which is perhaps your forte. So let's start with that. Opportunities for partnership between the public sector and the private sector. What are those opportunities?
Yeah, thank you for bringing that question. I think there are enormous opportunities, especially in the sectors we are talking about agriculture. When you look at the government, there is a commitment, a strong momentum from our governments in terms of increasing their budget allocation to agriculture sector. And through CADAP, through other initiative. And the reason why the government is doing that, they are putting in place infrastructure to boost the agricultural production, to address some of the issues related to coordination failures within the sector. There is that kind of uptake from the private sector now, given that the government has a number of our countries in the region have invested heavily, have allocated a substantial amount of the budget to build the infrastructure to facilitate the value chain, especially agricultural value chain. So there is a partnership on the private sector to de-risk the sector. You talked about issues of access to finance. I can tell the audience that now the banks, both commercial banks as well as development banks, they have even reduced the interest rate. The interest rate for those who are involved in agribusiness, those the producers themselves, the smallholder farmers themselves, the processors themselves, the traders themselves. So the entire value chain, there is that partnership from the producer to the processors to the traders, downstream to even to the consumers. So that kind of partnership, I think, is very critical, and is because through the partnership you achieve what we call a win-win situation. And there is that realization from both the private sector, including the financial institution, as well as the government, that we need to achieve a win-win situation. One of the panelists from Tanzania mentioned the SAGOT initiative. That's a whole mapping of the sector. There is a lot of value chain. There is rice production. There is the other staples. There is maize. There is all that sector. The involvement of the government of Tanzania is willing to put in place all the infrastructure to boost that sector. And they are calling the private investors to engage and invest in those sectors because there are opportunities. And the banks are able to provide the required finance in terms of that engagement. So that partnership is there. What has been lacking in the entire sector has been the information, especially on the side of the government as well as on the side of the private sector. And that's where we come in as EABC in terms of addressing what I call information asymmetry. Where is that information? Can we have a portal, a digital portal? Generally, yesterday I was on a Zoom call with SADC Chamber of Commerce, where they are saying we need to bring youth, we need to bring youth and women in terms of creating a digital platform where they can share information around the opportunities. And the agriculture sector featured as one of prominent sector where the youth and women constitute almost 70% in that sector. So there's that opportunity for partnership, and the infrastructure required, government is ready to provide the infrastructure required. So my appeal is to both the young investors, both women and the youth, to grab that opportunities. It is the right time as the region is open up for business through the EAC and through the Continental Free Trade Area. It is high time for the youth and women to work together with the government to ensure that those opportunities are realized.
Okay, and it's a good thing you raised the whole issue of infrastructure, because infrastructure is important in terms of minimizing post-harvest losses. All right, Ruth, both John and Dr. Kirenga in Tanzania raised the question of youth. I'm curious, how many of your members fall into the category of youth? I see you representing the female population.
Yeah, in my federation, most of the members are women, followed by youth and even men. But I've realized that women are doing a lot of farming in Kenya, and they make a lot of impact in the society. But currently we are trying to do a lot of capacity building to the value chains so that they can understand more on what they are doing in the farm. For example, if it is potatoes, we want the farmers to do the value chain so that they don't just suffer to plant and just sell at a throwaway price. So we always make sure that we capacity build them, let them do the farming and even do the value chain so that they can get more money. Secondly, we want to do protection and inclusion, especially when it comes to lending of funds. At times, women don't have the collateral part, so it becomes a bit hard for them to get loans from the banks because they don't have collateral. So as a federation, we really try and tell them to be in groups so that they can be facilitated. I like one thing in our banks, because when they're in the groups, they can still get funds without any individual collateral. So as a country or as a federation, our women have done so much. They are, most of them are in groups, followed by the youth. But the only unfortunate thing is that our men don't put themselves in groups. But in Kenya, most of the groups are made of women and youth. And they are making a lot of impact, because most of the small-scale SMEs, those are the small, medium enterprises, are giving funds to women and the youth, because most of them are in groups. And it has really made a lot of impact. So that is what we are encouraging. Another group which has come up also is a group of persons with disability. They had been forgotten for some time, but when they started being in groups, they started making a lot of impact. And even in one of the regions in the North Rift, we have seen a lot of work, because we gave them a small project of sheep, and it is making a lot of impact until even they are starting to learn to other small groups. So we have realized that if they are in groups, they make a lot of impact than individual development.
All right, thank you, Ruth. And Arthur, do come in at that point. Ruth says men are not as willing as women to be in groups as women and youth, but cooperatives is one way in which farmers have customarily, traditionally come together. How effective are they?
Cooperatives are extremely effective, as long as they don't get political in my country. They're extremely effective, and if you know a bit of about Ugandan history, our economy was founded on cooperatives. And of course, for some time, because of political turmoil, cooperatives disappeared. But they've come back into play, and they're actually making quite a huge difference in the lives of farmers, especially farmers up country. So the regions which don't have operating cooperatives actually don't do so well in farming. That's why you see now farming in Uganda is mainly taking off in central, western, and a lot of northern Uganda because of cooperatives. So because they provide the vehicle for the farmers to be able to take their product to market, but also get a good price for the product, and they protect farmers from the typical middlemen who really exploit the farmers, and of course also exploit the downstream client or the consumers. So they are working very well, and I think what we need to do is to strengthen them and build their capacity to even do a lot more, especially cooperatives which give out funds. There are cooperatives which are a hybrid of cooperatives and circles in some of the regions. And like I mentioned earlier, if these facilities could come through those circles, they can get to the rural farmers. And like I mentioned, the rural farmers don't have your typical conditions for getting a loan from a typical commercial bank, but then the circle or the cooperative knows how to lend to that farmer without asking for collateral, a physical collateral, so they can lend to them and still collect the money or make the farmer pay back the money using many other methods like reputation, like the culture of honor and shame, or like using group dynamics like village savings groups to make sure they collect, the person pays back what is supposed to pay back to the circle or the cooperative. So they are a good foundation for farming, and they need to be encouraged, and especially those which are giving out funds or those which are actually giving out maybe assets instead of giving out cash. Those which are giving out inputs and equipment for the farmers, they need to be encouraged and strengthened, and they need to be spread across the country. There are some development partners who are doing quite a lot in the cooperative sector. I know SNB does quite a lot of that, but I think now their efforts need to be channeled into the areas where cooperatives are weak, so they can be able to strengthen them and improve their agriculture and productivity in those parts of the country.
All right, thank you, Arthur. Dr. Kirenga, let me bring you in at this point. What way forward? I was looking at some statistics, some numbers on the AGRA website, and it talked about how rapid population poses a challenge for food security, how sub-Saharan Africa runs the risk of extreme poverty concentration come 2050. That is 4 out of every 5 people, and that we need to increase our food production levels by at least 70%. How do we get there if the majority of farmers in East Africa are smallholder farmers, and we have the challenge of the subdivision of land? How do we go about achieving this target?
Thank you. I will come in actually trying to respond to this question using 3 main areas or suggestions. First of all, when you have land fragmentation and you want to increase productivity, there is always an opportunity for land aggregation. And this can be done through block farming. It is very productive and very efficient. And there are so many benefits that can come out of blocking those fragmented pieces of land that actually do not make any economic progress to farmers when they continue farming in that way. It is very, very important to do this, and there are some examples where this has been done successfully. For example, in Tanzania, in tea, and also in some other areas where what sugarcane is produced. It's very, very easy to block, and also in potato producing areas. We have tried this in tea and in potato farmers, and we can see it's tremendous increase in productivity and efficiency. And also it unlocks the farmers to go and do other things. If you have 100 farmers, which were attending 1 acre farms, bringing together those 100 acres, actually 10 farmers can take care of the 100, can take care of those 100 farmers, and then 90 farmers can be engaging in other production, like for example, building structures, transportation, building houses, but also participating in other income generating activities. The other one is actually coming together into cooperatives, although you're working in your own farms. One thing which I would like probably the public to know, that Tanzania was the first country in Africa in early 30s to develop cooperatives in Kilimanjaro, and then it went again to the regions just south of Uganda, Bukoba, Kagera area. And then it also went into the cotton growing areas south of Lake Victoria. And that was extremely useful. Most of the people before our generation were actually taken to school through those cooperatives. Public services like transportation, education, hospitals were organized around that particular area. Of course, there is a period where, as my colleague in Uganda said, was a kind of a difficult time for cooperatives. We see the revival now, but also we see the need for increased actual ownership of the farmers in managing those cooperatives. There are various financial cooperatives that are coming up. Here they're formerly known as SACCOs. They're working very efficiently and bringing together the resources that farmers have, and through that they can do things together. The other thing which is with the land fragmentation, even if you don't have the chance to block or to engage in a cooperative environment, you can actually increase production and productivity if you take care of that soil. Just like which has been mentioned earlier, use technologies that will take care of the soil and increase production and productivity, and that will help that particular farmer to realize more income and actually to be able to address challenges like climate change and other similar challenges that farmers are facing at the moment. Let me stop here, and maybe I've tried to respond to this, but it's a major, major issue. Farmers must work together. There is strength in togetherness.
All right, thank you, Daktari. And John, let me come to you at this point. I raised the concern about poverty levels, extreme poverty levels. A lot of us were raised by parents off the back of the, what do I call it, the monies that were made by parents who farmed, right? Mm-hmm. Sold maize. So what potential does investing in the agricultural sector have in lifting people, communities out of poverty?
Thank you for that question. Myself also, I'm from a farming family. I grew and I was educated by a farmer. That is the starting point. Generally, the farming, the smallholders, the issue is not smallholders, farmers. The issue is how do we address barriers that impact or hinder the farming to be an opportunity, the farming to generate the income to the households who are involved in the farming. So there are a range of issues, from the access to inputs, to the production, then to the distribution, to the storage facilities, and to the marketing. If I give an example, for instance, if milk that is produced by your neighbor cannot access the neighbor's market, that's a challenge. So for me, it's not about the size of the land. For me, it is an issue of man-made barriers, what we call non-tariff barriers or technical barriers to trade. We need a kind of a paradigm shift in terms of how we have been treating our traditional agriculture. I'm happy to say that even before I took over this position, I was working with the East African Farmers Federation. And there are a number of tools from the development partners, from the governments, in terms of demonstrating the value we generate, the value proposition from our agriculture sector. But we always, in our communities, in our different actors, they are always creating a barrier at each and every stage. And that frustrates a farmer. As I said, from the production to the farm gate to the processors, there are a number of barriers. So the only way to do, and that's why the farming, even the banks have been so risk-averse in terms of lending to agriculture, because they say they perceive agriculture to be a risk sector, a risk in the sense that, of course, it depends entirely on rainfall, which the rain patterns have changed given the climatic changes in the region and the whole world. That is an aspect, maybe we'll have a discussion on that. But if we are able to address those issues from the production distribution, marketing, until the product reaches the consumer, then we would be able to see the value proposition from the farming sector. So I think there are a range of those barriers, as I said, the investors in the milk production plant, if they cannot transport their milk from the farm to the market because of these barriers, then everyone gets frustrated. So we need to streamline, and we need to streamline our value, our value chains, especially agriculture-related value chains, from the farm to the market. When you look at the statistics, the post-harvest losses in the region accounts for almost 35% of total outputs. That's a big loss. The cause is that, first I said, the issue of infrastructure. There are no storage facilities. Generally, in my previous job, we were advocating for creating a kind of a green lane for at the borders, where we have one-stop border post. Can we have a green lane for perishable products? Pineapples, maybe from Uganda to South Sudan, vegetables, those are perishable products. Could you make them seamless to cross the border without subjecting them to hassles, customs-related hassles? When you delay a truck that is carrying a perishable for 2 days at the border, carrying pineapples, fresh pineapples, we are talking about youth. Those pineapples are grown by women and by youth. Then we are impoverishing that segment of the society, because we are creating barriers. So there is a need for a mindset shift, a paradigm shift in all actors, from the government, from all the players along the value chain, to address inefficiencies. So to make the sector a viable sector for any investors, either regional or any investors from the rest of the world.
All right. Okay, thank you, John. And we are not finishing that right now. Like I said, I'm handing over to my colleague, Smriti Vidyarthi, who's picking up the conversation from 7:30 p.m. after NTV Jioni, which is our Kiswahili news at 7. So, yes, so she will be picking up that issue of value addition. She'll also be picking up that issue of how are we streamlining the value chain across East Africa. So that will be addressed. The hashtag is resilient food systems. Thank you so much even to our Zoom participants. You can use the same link to join our conversation at 7:30 with Smriti Vidyarthi. And quickly, just some feedback. We have Egyptian who says there must be a way to integrate tree planting in our school systems. All kids must plant a tree when joining grade 1 at county level. All right, clearly there's a lot that we need to get into. That conversation will continue. The hashtag again is resilient food systems at 7:30. Let me make way for the Kiswahili news. Haya mambo hayajaisha.
Morphix provides freedom of movement for your baby.
Yes, my baby moves easily now.
All babies deserve a high-quality diaper. You should also try Morphix.
This is NTV.
Na hujambo mtazamaji, natumai ubuheri wa afya, ikiwa ni tarehe 5 mwezi wa Agosti. Karibu sana, tumekuandalia mengi kwenye NTV jioni, lakini kwanza tupate vipasho.
Mtu mmoja aripotiwa kufariki kwenye maandamano na fujo za kulalamikia mauaji ya ndugu wawili katika kaunti ya Embu. Makao makuu ya kaunti ya Murang'a yafungwa kwa wiki 2 kutokana na msambao wa corona, huku Kenya ikiingia katika wimbi la 4.
Have resolved several issues pertaining to the COVID-19 fight.
Hivi mtu akifika kwenye boda ya Kenya na Tanzania anatakiwa asisumbuliwe kwa lipi ambalo ameshalifanya alikotoka.
Kenya na Tanzania zaahidi kushirikiana zaidi kukabili corona mpakani, huku maambukizi ya leo nchini yakipindukia.
People make choices at the opportune moment when they think different choices are necessary.
Na mpasuko waanza kujitokeza ndani ya UDA, huku naibu rais akiwaita viongozi wa mrengo wake kuziba ufa. Kunani?
Mubashara kutoka jumba la Nation. Hii ni NTV Weekendi na Nuru Abdulaziz.
Na karibu sana, shukran sana kwa kuchagua kuwa nasi. Mwenzangu wa ishara ni Flora Atieno. Tukianza taarifa zetu ni kwamba mtu mmoja amefariki kwenye tandabelua ya maandamano mjini Embu kuhusiana na mauaji ya kaka wawili Jumapili iliyopita baada ya kutiwa mbaroni na polisi. Uchunguzi wa maiti hizo mbili umeahirishwa hadi kesho kubaini kilichosababisha vifo hivyo, huku mamlaka ya kutathmini utendakazi wa polisi IPOA ikianza upelelezi. Aidha, mashahidi wawili wa tukio hilo pia wamesimulia yaliyotokea.
Katika kisa kingine cha uhasama kati ya raia na polisi, mtu mmoja amefariki kwenye tandabelua ya kukashifu mauaji ya kaka wawili, Emmanuel Mutora wa miaka 19 na Benson Jiru wa miaka 22. Machafuko hayo yalivuruga shughuli zote mjini Kiamukoma, Embu, walikofia ndugu hao. Lakini nyumbani kwa ndugu hao, biwi la simanzi limetanda, kimya cha kuhuzunisha na maombolezi ya kupanga mazishi, huku mama hasa akitafakari uchungu wa kufiwa na watoto wawili kwa mpigo.
Ben ndiye alikuwa kijana yangu kama ya mkono. Judia anausanga majani chai, anaendea na pikipiki mpaka kahawa ikifunwa, ni yeye ako huko kama manager. Emmanuel naye ndiye anapikanga sana, ananiambia mama, acha nikupikie shule ikifunguliwa sitakuweko.
Na kama mzazi inaniuma, na mimi singetaka kuongea sana mambo ya hiyo majeraha. It was very painful, sababu moja ubongo inatoka, it's very painful.
Wanaume wawili walioshuhudia Emmanuel na Benson wamefichua kuwa kinyume na madai ya polisi, vijana hao hawakuruka kutoka kwa gari likiendeshwa.
Tukihepa azinuka rawali kama alikuwa ametukamia teke, azin alikuwa nakaa ni mrefu, azin maskula kiasi. Then alikuwa tukamia ilikuwa inakaa na maubaya zini. Sasa mwisho aligongwa na kuna hiyo sauti ya mtu kugongwa hiyo. Mimi nilikuwa nimejificha, lakini sasa niliona walioko kwa siti za mbele za gari. Nilisikia msee amepigwa azin hiyo sound ya kistaff kimepiga msee azin hard. Nikatry kujua ni nini, lakini masansa wengine walikuwa wanakaa.
Hata hivyo, mamlaka ya kutathmini utendakazi wa polisi IPOA imeanzisha uchunguzi.
Make sure an urgent impartial investigation will be done and the family will get justice.
Marehemu Emmanuel na Benson walikuwa wanafunzi wa masomo ya sheria na uhandisi katika chuo kikuu na walikutana na mauti Jumapili huko Embu walipokuwa wameenda kuwajulia hali wazazi wakati wa likizo fupi shuleni. Nayoma Sampao, NTV.
Na tunatumai kwamba ukweli utabainika kuhusiana na kesi hiyo. Mtazamaji, tukisonga mbele ni kwamba Kenya na Tanzania sasa zitashirikiana moja kwa moja katika kukabiliana na janga la COVID-19. Mpango huo umefanikishwa na uamuzi wa Tanzania kubadilisha sera yake kuhusiana na ugonjwa wa corona. Aidha, mabadiliko hayo yameleta mwamko mpya baina ya Kenya na Tanzania baada ya miezi kadhaa ya vuta nikuvute mwaka jana, hususan shughuli za kibiashara kati ya nchi zote mbili. Haya yanajiri wiki chache baada ya Tanzania kuzindua mpango wa kutoa chanjo ya corona. Helen Aura ana taarifa hiyo kwa kina.
Kulingana na shirika la WHO, virusi vya corona vya Delta vimesababisha ongezeko la maambukizi katika mataifa mengi ya Afrika. Na Kenya haijasazwa. Yamkini hospitali za Kenya zinakabiliwa na changamoto mbili kubwa: uhaba wa vitanda vya ICU vya COVID-19 na kuadimika kwa oksijeni. Hata hivyo, vita dhidi ya corona nchini vimepata mwamko mpya baada ya Tanzania kubadilisha sera yake kuhusu janga hili na kuamua kushirikiana na Kenya kupambana na COVID-19. Mtafaruku wa awali uliotokana na sera ya Tanzania kutozingatia vigezo vya kisayansi kukabiliana na corona, hali iliyopeleka Kenya kuanza kudhibiti hasa madereva wa Tanzania kuingia nchini kama mbinu ya kupunguza kuenea kwa COVID-19 kutoka taifa hilo. Hatua hiyo ilisababisha mvutano wa kidiplomasia na itifaki katika nchi zote mbili hadi alipoingia Rais Samia Suluhu Hassan, na uhusiano huu mpya sasa umezaa matunda.
We have resolved several issues pertaining to the COVID-19 fight, which are contained in a joint communique that we are going to share with you. The areas we have tackled include cross-border issues that involve citizens of both countries, such as transport, COVID-19 testing, and validation systems.
Hivi mtu akifika kwenye boda ya Kenya na Tanzania, anatakiwa asisumbuliwe kwa lipi ambalo ameshalifanya alikotoka. This is an issue. Lakini je, huyu anayekuja na ndege za kimataifa na ile certificate kubwa ya PCR test iweje Tanzania iwe masaa 72 wakati Kenya ni masaa 96? Haina maana yoyote. Ni sisi wataalamu wa kuguide viongozi wetu ili tuweze kuharmonize wananchi wetu na wageni wetu waweze kufurahia.
Ikumbuke kwamba taswira ya awali ilisababisha kusitishwa kwa safari za ndege katika nchi zote mbili kabla ya mzozo kutatuliwa. Awali Tanzania haikuwa ikinakili takwimu za maambukizi ya COVID-19 wala mikakati na kanuni za udhibiti kama vile kutumia barakoa, kutumia vyeuzi na masharti ya usafiri kuzingatiwa. Lakini mwezi uliopita Tanzania ilipokea chanjo milioni 1 za Johnson & Johnson baada ya jopo kazi la kukabiliana na corona Tanzania kutoa ushauri kwa Rais Suluhu.
We started with our own context approach in Tanzania to save the lives of people with what we had given the history of tiba asili and the experience, and we saved many lives. Akaja Mheshimiwa Samia Suluhu Hassan, Rais awamu ya 6, akasema kazi iendelee. Kazi ya kuendelea kujiridhisha na chanjo ikaendelea.
Rais Samia Suluhu aliongoza kwenye mstari wa mbele kutoa mfano wa manufaa ya chanjo kwa kupewa chanjo hiyo. Helen Aura, NTV.
Naam, kwenye siasa ni kwamba mpasuko umeanza kujitokeza katika mrengo wa naibu rais baada ya viongozi kadhaa kutoka Mlima Kenya kukosa kuhudhuria kikao cha viongozi wa Hasla nyumbani kwa Ruto mapema leo. NTV imebaini kuwa kinara wa chama cha PEP Moses Kuria hakuhudhuria kutokana na kutoridhishwa kwake na muamala wa hivi karibuni kati ya UDA na chama chake. Pia waziri wa zamani Mwangi Kiunjuri anayeongoza chama cha TSP pia hakuhudhuria. Na kama anavyoripoti mwandishi wetu Seth Olali, naibu rais amesema safari ya kukihama chama cha Jubilee inakaribia.
Baada ya kikao cha saa 3 katika makao rasmi ya naibu rais William Ruto, wabunge zaidi ya 100 walitoa taarifa kwa vyombo vya habari kuashiria maazimio ya kikao hicho.
Governing Jubilee Party has collapsed. The opposition NASA coalition has disintegrated. The Hasra nation has found a new home in the United Democratic Alliance.
Regrettably, the NASA coalition, its principals, and their Jubilee collaborators took the government hostage, hijacked its agenda, and, 1, completely destroyed the governing Jubilee Party and dismembered the entire opposition coalition. 2, emasculated parliament, undermined the rule of law, threatened the independence of the judiciary, and emboldened impunity. 3, sabotaged job creation, universal health coverage, food security and manufacturing, thus cutting the entire Big Four plan.
People make choices at the opportune moment when they think different choices are necessary.
Hata hivyo, ni mzozo kati ya chama cha UDA cha naibu rais William Ruto na chama cha People's Empowerment kinachoongozwa na mbunge wa Gatundu Moses Kuria uliojitokeza wazi kwenye mkutano wa mahasla, kwani mbunge huyo wa Gatundu hakuhudhuria mkutano. Aliyekuwa kiongozi wa wengi katika bunge la taifa Aden Duale alipoulizwa kuhusu hilo alipatwa na kigugumizi na ilimbidi naibu rais amnongonezee jibu mwafaka kwa wanahabari.
PEP, who is a hustler from the hustler nation, is here and is part of our PG.
Duale akiashiria mbunge wa Juja George Koimburi ambaye alishinda uchaguzi mdogo wa Juja kupitia chama cha Moses Kuria People's Empowerment. Kinara wa chama cha TSP Mwangi Kiunjuri pia hakuhudhuria kikao cha huko Karen. Akihutubia mkutano maalum ulioleta pamoja kundi la vijana kutoka Murang'a, naibu mwenyekiti wa chama cha Jubilee David Murathe alitangaza wazi kwamba mbunge huyo wa Gatundu tayari anaegemea upande wa Rais Uhuru Kenyatta.
Moses Kuria wewe unamjua. Moses anaongea na wale mchana, alafu usiku anaenda kwa nyumba.
Kulingana na wandani, mzozo kati ya chama cha Moses Kuria PEP na kile cha Ruto UDA ulianza baada ya Kuria kukatazwa kusimamisha mgombeaji wa eneo bunge la Kiambaa. Kufuatia mzozo huo, mbunge huyo wa Gatundu amekuwa akijitenga na shughuli za chama cha UDA, hasa kwenye uchaguzi mdogo katika maeneo ya Maguga na Kiambaa. Na naibu rais alipoulizwa kuhusu uhusiano wa chama cha Mwangi Kiunjuri The Service Party na UDA katika mkutano wa leo.
Thank you very much, Mr. Olale. As has been communicated to you, that was not part of the discussion today. So, at an appropriate moment, when that becomes a subject of discussion in our PG, we will ably respond.
Mahaslas waliamua kuendeleza mjadala wa uchumi wa taifa kupitia mfumo wa bottom up na vile kushinikiza serikali kutoa chanjo kwa Wakenya wote ili kudhibiti COVID-19. Naibu rais aidha amesema safari ya kuondoka Jubilee inakaribia, lakini itakuwa kwa hiari. Kwa kile kinachoshuhudiwa kuwa ubabe wa kisiasa, Naibu Rais William Ruto ambaye hii leo aliongoza mkutano uliojumuisha zaidi ya viongozi 100 wanaoegemea chama cha UDA, angali anaangazia mikakati mwafaka kabla ya kujiondoa rasmi kutoka chama cha Jubilee. Seth Olale, NTV, katika makao makuu ya Naibu Rais, kaunti ya Nairobi.
Na mtazamaji, taarifa inayotamatishia sehemu yetu ya kwanza NTV jioni. Tunarudi na mengi zaidi kwenye sehemu ya pili, na punde baada ya habari zetu tutakuwa na mazungumzo maalum kwenye jukwaa la uongozi na Nation Leadership Forum kwa udhamini wa Agra na taendeshwa na Simriti Vidyarthi. Salia papa hapa.
Do not miss out. Get Vaseline Jelly and save big. Buy the new Vaseline 50ml Baby, now down to 55 Kenya shillings, or the 450ml Family Pack, now down to 350 Kenya shillings. Want the original? We've got you. Get the 250ml Vaseline Pure Petroleum Jelly, now down to 199 Kenya shillings, or a 450ml Family Pack, now down to 350 Kenya shillings, and experience the healing power of Vaseline. Available at all Dukas and supermarkets near you.
During their periods, 40% of women experience leaks at night, and this affects how they start their day. Not anymore. Don't spend a restless night with new Always Dreams. Now with a wider back and leak guard channels that lock liquid no matter how you move.
Have a good night's sleep and a kick-ass game.
Discover Always' brand new night range.
Today tastes like a piece of the action. And it never tasted this good.
Mama, how can I be a champion, Mama?
Well, you've got to be like a geisha ball. Staying strong and going so far.
It's strong and lasts long. Like geisha.
All the days and the nights, reading for them and to them. You don't stop, and neither do we. Help build a strong foundation for your growing child with Nestle Nunkid. Nestle Nunkid 4. Our best for you.
Hey, now that's hitting the right notes. When life gets boring, we bring out our play. You see, playfulness is in our DNA. It's in the way we move and laugh. It's in the way we walk, the way we rock, and how we just don't stop. You feel me? We add color to everything, to every day and every dish, because the world needs our crazy. We're the different flavors that make life more exciting. We're the ones who add color to every moment. Fanta, color every moment.
Naam, shukran sana kwa kuendelea kuwa nasi. Kenya ni kati ya nchi 3 barani Afrika zilizoingia katika wimbi la 4 la janga la corona. Hii ni kulingana na ripoti ya kila wiki inayotolewa na kituo cha udhibiti wa maradhi Afrika CDC. Wakati huo kaunti tofauti humu nchini zimeanza kuchukua hatua zaidi za kudhibiti msambao wa maradhi ya corona baada ya kurekodi ongezeko la visa vya maradhi hayo. Ruth Sarmoe ana maelezo zaidi.
Kaunti ya Murang'a ni ya hivi punde kusitisha shughuli katika makao makuu yake baada ya kurekodi ongezeko la visa vya corona katika siku 14 zilizopita. Hatua hii imechangiwa na kuambukizwa kwa baadhi ya wafanyikazi wa kaunti hiyo. Takriban watu 40 wamelazwa katika hospitali ya rufaa ya Murang'a, huku watu 14 wakipokea matibabu katika kitengo cha wagonjwa mahututi.
We have had 2 areas, especially in Gatanga, Mukuru village and Jaine village, where the spike has been very high. We've already lost 7 people there, and I think the situation is very bad right now.
I associate this wave
not only to political gatherings, but also to the weather. The weather, we have experienced that during this cold weather also we have increased number or increased incidences of respiratory tract infection.
Aidha, kaunti hiyo imeeleza kuwa itaendelea kutoa huduma zilizo muhimu katika ofisi zake. Hii leo, Kenya imerekodi visa 1571 vya maambukizi kati ya sampuli 9,065 vilivyopimwa na kufikisha idadi jumla ya watu walioambukizwa kuwa 208,262. Idadi ya maambukizi ni 17.3%. Kaunti ya Nairobi inaongoza katika visa vya maambukizi ikifuatwa na kaunti za Kiambu, Mombasa na Nakuru mtawaliwa. Watu 4,497 wamepona maradhi hayo kufikisha idadi ya waliopona kukaribia 200,000. Watu 3 wameaga dunia ndani ya saa 24 zilizopita, huku wengine 29 wakifariki na ni vifo vya kuripotiwa kwa kuchelewa. Wakati huo huo, serikali imetoa orodha ya vituo vinavyotoa chanjo ya korona mjini Nairobi, wizara ya afya ikisisitiza kuwa chanjo zinatolewa bila malipo. Huku haya yakijiri, kituo cha udhibiti wa maradhi Afrika CDC kimeeleza kuwa tayari Kenya imeingia katika wimbi la 4. Aidha, Afrika CDC inaeleza kuwa kumekuwa na ongezeko la visa vya korona katika nchi za Kiafrika kwa 2% kila wiki. Kenya imerekodi ongezeko wastani la 19% ya visa vya korona. Vilevile, ripoti hiyo inaeleza kuwa kumekuwa na ongezeko wastani la visa vya vifo kwa 6% wiki hii, Kenya ikiwa nchi ya 5 na rekodi ya ongezeko wastani la 8% katika visa vya vifo. Tayari zaidi ya visa milioni 6.8 vimeripotiwa barani Afrika, hii ikiwa ina maana visa hivyo ni vya 3.4% kote ulimwenguni. Zaidi ya watu milioni 6 wamepona kutokana na maradhi hayo, huku bara hili likirekodi zaidi ya vifo 1,173. Ruth Sarmoi, NTV.
Na mtazamaji, kila mtu ana jukumu katika vita dhidi ya virusi hivi au ugonjwa huu wa korona. Na tukisonga mbele, tukielekea kule Kisii, kwamba uchunguzi wa maiti ya wanandoa wawili walioteketea ndani ya nyumba yao huko Kisii umeonyesha kuwa mwanamume alikuwa na majeraha ya kuumizwa kwa kifaa butu. Uchunguzi huo wa maiti ulifanywa baada ya familia yao kushuku kwamba huenda moto uliowachoma uliwashwa makusudi. Inadaiwa kabla ya vifo vya wanandoa hao wawili walikuwa wamepokea vitisho kutoka afisa fulani wa polisi. Ripoti ya mwanapatholojia mkuu wa serikali Johansen Odur inasema Moruri Mugoa mwenye umri wa miaka 61 na Florence Mora mwenye umri wa miaka 52 walikuwa hai kabla ya moto huo kuwashwa. Lakini ukaguzi huo wa maiti pia umebaini kwamba Mugoa alikuwa na majeraha ya kuumizwa kwa kifaa butu kabla ya kuchomeka. Mugoa na mkewe walikuwa wanaishi kwa nyumba yao ya kustaafu huko Sameta, kaunti ya Kisii hadi tanzia hiyo ya Alhamisi.
There was some blood in the back of the head, which raises a question of whether was this person hit by a blunt object, and that's what I said is subject to further investigation by the police.
We want to dispute any claims by the police commander that the fire was out of gas explosion. From the experts you've heard, they inhaled fumes, and the way we found the body of my father, he was lying facing downwards.
Na tunaenda mapumzikoni, lakini kumbuka kuna mengi tu kwenye NTV jioni, usiende mbali.
Enjoy the best family entertainment on StarTimes Classic or Smart Bouquet.
Oh yes.
Subscribe to Classic Bouquet for only $899 for 30 days or Smart Bouquet for only $999 for 30 days. Kama ni bei, ni StarTimes.
Geukia kitu kiambia triki sana. Unajua sisi wa Kenya tunajulikana kwa mbio, na timu yetu ya kuwakilisha Kenya katika mbio za Tokyo, Japan imeshawasili huko Japan. Sasa wakienda huko wanashinda gold, wanashinda silver, wanashinda bronze. Lakini usishtuke, ukiwa hapa nyumbani bado wewe unaweza jishindia gold yako 1 million Kenya shillings, ama silver yako 750,000 Kenya shillings, ama bronze yako 500,000. Hiyo yote ni kwa hisani ya loto. Imagine ukicheza loto ukiwa hapa home, hauhitaji kukimbia ndio ushinde. Wewe cheza loto, alafu tutakuwa tunakutangaza mshindi wa either bronze ama silver ama gold.
Play responsibly. This message has been approved by the BCLB.
Ruiru Mabati Factory offers the best quality mabati at the most affordable prices. We pride in our 10 years experience. Our products have 15 years warranty and are KEB certified. We manufacture box profile, Europe tile, Jenga tile, corrugated S profile, among others, in a wide variety of colors. Enjoy our free delivery in just 72 hours. To order, call us now on 0111 050 700. Ruiru Mabati Factory. Mali safi kwa bei poa.
Manage your card from your phone 24/7. Freeze and unfreeze lost or stolen cards. Manage your limit and change your PIN on the ABSA mobile banking app. Another digital innovation that gets things done. That's Africanacity. That's ABSA.
This looks different.
It is 8K video, beyond cinema quality.
So
you can pull portrait quality photos straight from video.
But will it last the whole trip?
Battery for the whole trip and the way back.
This is different.
Told you.
Hello, madam. Would you like to join us on this mission?
Yes, but how?
Just one question for you. How do you keep your toilet clean?
I use regular detergent and bleach for washing and removing yellow stains. I've been using it for years.
Oh, madam, the regular detergents and bleach are used for washing clothes. To disinfect your toilet properly, you need Harpic 10X. It is specially made for germs and stains removal. Harpic's thick formula settles on stains and gives 10 times better cleaning compared to regular detergents and bleach.
Wow, now I'm convinced, Helen Paul.
Really?
Yeah.
Now that she's part of the mission, the next house is yours.
If there's one thing that all soaps do, it's wash. From buckets to basins, bathrooms to streams, and everything in between.
All soaps wash.
Yes, but Protex is different. Its reinvented formula with flaxseed oil boosts your skin's natural anti-germ defenses by 10 times more, protecting you against 99.9% of germs. So what keeps us healthy?
Protex.
Protex. Good health starts here.
Na kwenye taarifa za spoti, Mkenya Abel Kipsang amevunja rekodi ya Olimpiki ya mbio za mita 1500 kwa wanaume baada ya kumaliza nusu fainali ya pili ya mbio hizo huko Tokyo katika muda wa dakika 3 na sekunde 31.65. Kipsang sasa atashirikiana na bingwa wa dunia Timothy Cheruiyot kuwinda medali kwenye fainali ya mbio hizo Jumamosi. Chipukizi Abel Kipsang alishinda nusu fainali ya pili kwenye mbio zilizokuwa na mwendo kasi zaidi kuliko nusu fainali ya kwanza. Bingwa wa dunia Cheruiyot alimaliza watatu katika mchujo wa kwanza nyuma ya Whiteman Jake wa Uingereza na Marekani Hooker Cole. Charles Simot hakufuzu kwa fainali baada ya kumaliza katika nafasi ya 6 kwenye nusu fainali ya kwanza. Huku mashindano ya Olimpiki yakielekea ukingoni huko na tukiendelea tu kule Tokyo, kurunzi sasa zimeanza kuelekezwa kwa mashindano ya dunia ya riadha kwa vijana wasiozidi umri wa miaka 20. Maafisa wa runinga NTV Kenya inayomilikiwa na Nation Media Group ambao ina haki za kutangaza mashindano hayo hapa nchini wameizuru uwanja wa kimataifa wa michezo wa Moi Kasarani utakaokuwa mwenyeji wa mashindano hayo. Uwanja huo umefanyiwa ukarabati huku viti vikirembeshwa kwa rangi za bendera ya Kenya. Waziri wa michezo Amina Mohamed alitangaza awali kwamba mashindano yataendelea bila mashabiki. Michuano hiyo ya Agosti 17 hadi 22 itahusisha maelfu ya vijana chipukizi kutoka zaidi ya mataifa 100.
The future of this country depends on our youth, and NTV is committed to developing the talents of our youth, is committed to actually enabling our youth to achieve their full potential. So this partnership where NTV will be the free-to-air broadcaster really is critical to us.
We're very glad that NTV has come in as a partner
to be the main broadcaster for this event. I want to just guarantee the fans at home that the stadium is ready to host the event. The LOC has worked very hard to ensure that we've basically dotted all the dots and ticked all the I's, and as of this morning, had more than 100 teams confirming their participation in the event. So we're very proud and excited about that.
Na mtazamaji, kufikia hapa tunatamatisha NTV jioni. Shukran sana, na kumbuka kwamba mazungumzo maalum kwenye Nation Leadership Forum yanajiri tu baada ya muda usiokuwa mrefu kwa udhamini wa Agra. Kwa hivyo usikose. Alamsiki.
Presenting the new Harpic bathroom cleaner. Compared to ordinary detergents, its thick formulation gives you superior cleaning and kills 99.9% of germs and viruses all around the bathroom. Blue
for the toilet
and red
for the bathroom.
Why do we do it? Hide, cover up, tone down. Choose boldness. Celebrate the skin you're in and dress with confidence with Nivea Nourishing Cocoa Body Lotion. The triple-layered care of deep moisture serum, precious cocoa butter and vitamin E enriches your skin for 48 hours. It's time to show off your best skin. Wear your skin with pride every time with Nivea Nourishing Cocoa Body Lotion.
Watch Africa rise in the land of the rising sun. It's the first time in Olympic history.
Watch the rise at Tokyo 2020 on 8 dedicated channels on SuperSport, your world of champions. Get connected with DSTV.
A lion! Ah, yes, the king of the jungle. Time for a Red Bull.
Red Bull? Still, you'll never be faster than a lion.
I don't have to be quicker than the lion, just faster than you.
Red Bull gives you wings.
I have to admit, I didn't like Sukuma Wiki when I was growing up, but now I've created a way to make Sukuma Wiki tastier and meatier. I simply add 2 Royco beef cubes, and the end result is a rich, meaty flavor. And today, I have brought along my harshest food critics for a taste test. My kids.
More, please.
Royco beef cubes. Add 2 small cubes for a big, meaty taste.
I wish I could have soft and glowing skin.
New Geisha Black Soap with activated charcoal to give you soft and glowing skin. New Geisha Black Soap and New Geisha Moringa.
For an exclusive fragrance experience, try Nivea Men Deep Impact Body Lotion with a long-lasting woody fragrance, deep moisture, and a fresh skin feel. Make an impact with Nivea Men Deep Impact. Nivea Men, it starts with you.
Today tastes like a piece of the action. And it never tasted this good.
Why do we do it? Hide, cover up, tone down. Choose boldness. Celebrate the skin you're in and dress with confidence with Nivea Nourishing Cocoa Body Lotion. The triple-layered care of deep moisture serum, precious cocoa butter and vitamin E enriches your skin for 48 hours. It's time to show off your best skin. Wear your skin with pride every time with Nivea Nourishing Cocoa Body Lotion.
Nestle Nunkid 4 helps build a strong foundation for your growing child. Nestle Nunkid 4, our best for you.
Geukia kitu kiambia triki sana. Unajua sisi wa Kenya tunajulikana kwa mbio, na timu yetu ya kuwakilisha Kenya katika mbio za Tokyo, Japan imeshawasili huko Japan. Sasa wakienda huko wanashinda gold, wanashinda silver, wanashinda bronze. Lakini usishtuke, ukiwa hapa nyumbani bado wewe unaweza jishindia gold yako 1 million Kenya shillings ama silver yako.
Okay. Okay.
Sorry, bear with us. When we do things via Zoom, it's so hectic sometimes.
Thank you.
It's different these days for everyone.
I know. Okay, testing voice level. So who were you just speaking to?
This is
Ogendo.
Nega.
Okay, and so you want me to call Dr. Nega?
I am here online.
He said all he
This
could
is
see
Nega.
was... Yeah, I am. I'm calling him. Oh, okay. Dr. Nega,
Okay.
if you can hear me, could you please enable your video?
Okay, I will enable the video.
There
Okay,
we
do you
go.
see me now?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, you are fine. Thank you. And hi, Professor Ogendo.
I'm doing fine, Maggie.
No, this is...
Oh, that is Smriti?
This is Smriti, yes. I know you've
Okay,
been
but
talking...
I've not seen your face. Would like to see your face.
Oh, okay, you will shortly, I'm told.
Okay.
In case of anything, you can always just text me, and same with you, Dr.
Okay.
Nega. If you need
Okay.
to, if you need to communicate, just drop me a text message.
Sure,
Okay.
we'll do that.
Now, I just want to let you both know that when we start, I'll do an introduction to the topic, and then I will introduce a video done by Agra, and then we'll get into conversation.
Okay.
Yes?
Yeah, that's okay.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Professor Onyango, can we just have your sound level? So just tell me how your day has been.
My day has been amazing. I was just looking forward to this. My first time in the studio in the 2 years, I think.
Okay, great. And Professor Boga?
Thank you very much for inviting me. It's a first opportunity.
A very good evening to you and welcome to the Nation Leadership Forum. I'm your host, Smriti Vidyarthi. Now, agriculture is one of East Africa's most critical sectors. It is through farming that nations strive to feed themselves. In the region, about 80% of the population living in rural areas depend on agriculture for their livelihood. So the dependence on the sector is huge, but challenges are impacting productivity and livelihoods. Tonight's topic of discussion is building Africa's resilient food systems. Just how do we do this? Well, I'll be joined by a panel to lend their expertise on this topic in just a moment. But first, let's listen in to remarks by Dr. Agnes Kalibata, the UN Secretary General's Special Envoy for the Food Systems Summit and President of AGRA, that is the Alliance for a Green Revolution in Africa.
Thank you for those introductory remarks. Distinguished partners, panelists, our audience, ladies and gentlemen, we are pleased you're able to join us on this Farmers Forum today. It's part of a series of conversations that we have initiated since we started the Food Systems Summit, but it's also part of the work that we do as AGRA, putting farmers forward and putting farmers first and ensuring that the work that we do and the development of the continent is anchored around farmers. AGRA, the institution I lead, has done a lot of work in trying to ensure that farmers have access to to what they need to be able to have productive farming, to be able to farm as businesses. We focus on advancing systems, functional systems for the agricultural sector to ensure that farmers and private sector have a working environment for input systems, but also a good policy environment to ensure that governments and other institutions have the support they need to be able to advance this. This particular forum will speak to sustainable agriculture in the wake of climate change, recognizing the need for resilience and the need for adaptation to climate change, but also recognizing the interconnectedness of agricultural systems to climate change and the fact that the continent, our continent specifically, will not advance unless we make progress on climate change. Yes, it's true, we contribute very little to climate change, but climate change is definitely defining our lives, and we have to be part of ensuring that the world understands how climate change is impacting smallholder farmers. But we also want to make sure that the work we do does not contribute to climate change. This work also will recognize what is happening under the AU CAADP Marabou commitment and towards the Sustainable Development Goals, of which the Food Systems Summit that I lead is now working on, recognizing fully well that in both these areas, the Marabou commitments and Sustainable Development Goals, we are behind on some of the most critical areas on zero hunger, on nutrition and malnutrition, but also on climate change, like I just said. We are contributing to biodiversity loss. 80% biodiversity loss comes from agricultural systems, and agricultural systems are contributing 30% to climate change. So let's focus on ensuring that these frameworks that we had already put in place from an African continent perspective, but also from a global perspective, let's focus on ensuring that these frameworks work. And more importantly, let's focus on ensuring that they work for smallholder farmers. Lastly, I want to recognize that this is a time to build back better. I want to recognize that our smallholder farmers have been challenged just like everybody else in our community. Use the opportunity that the Food Systems Summit is offering and be able to double down on efforts that will ensure equity, will ensure better livelihoods, and will ensure better incomes for smallholder farmers. I want to appreciate the work that farmers do, but I also want to appreciate the Farmers Forum as the opportunity that we have and farmers have to bring issues to the attention of all stakeholders, to bring issues to the forefront, and to bring the issues that the continent is struggling with, from ending hunger, from equity, from challenges that face women and youth employment, which is a big challenge on our continent, the opportunity that we have in our midst right now is to bring these issues to the fore. And no group of people is more credible than the Farmers Forum to present these issues on behalf of farmers.
All right, speaking there, Dr. Agnes Kalibata, the UN Secretary General Special Envoy for the Food Systems Summit and President of AGRA, highlighting what's being done and what more still needs to be done. All right, at this point, let me now bring in my guests to discuss how indeed we can build Africa's resilient food systems. Joining me now is Professor Hamadi Boga, the Principal Secretary of the State Department for Agricultural Research in the Ministry of Agriculture, Livestock and Fisheries. Professor Ruth Onyango, the founder of Rural Outreach Africa and the publisher of Africa Journal of Food and Agriculture. They join me in studio. Online, Professor Joshua Ogendo, Associate Professor in the Faculty of Agriculture at the Egerton University, and also Dr. Nega Wubene, the Country Manager of AGRA Ethiopia. That's the Alliance for a Green Revolution in Africa. Thank you all so much for joining us on this Nation Leadership Forum. Well, you too can be a part of the conversation. Please do use the hashtag NMG Leadership Forum. Our social media platforms are all live, and you can also tweet me at Smriti Vidyarthi or at NTV Kenya, and we'll sample some of your views shortly in this broadcast. All right, so I'll start with you, Professor Boga, and we are in the middle of a pandemic that has really exposed the fragility of our healthcare system, of our economy, but also of our food systems. How would you describe Kenya's agriculture sector today, and are we food secure?
Yeah, thank you very much, Smitri. Yes, I think, thank you very much for inviting me to give the perspective of how the food security situation is. When the pandemic started rolling out, the ministry set up what we call the Food Security War Room. And the main focus of the Food Security War Room was to make sure that there was access to food and that the food was available and that it was affordable. And so we tracked every element of the food system to make sure that the system was not disrupted. And I think we succeeded because we were able to make sure that food reached every corner of Kenya and that it reached there in good time and that there was no restrictions. And we were able to put up protocols to guide to make sure that markets remained open and that everybody was supported to make sure that food was available. We have a system in the country where we regularly get data on a monthly basis to look at what we call the food balance sheet. For every commodity that is a staple, we have a food balance sheet that shows us how the year will be. From the data that I have, we are food secure all the way up to next year. Our data shows that although there has been disturbed or depressed rainfall, we are still at 80%, and we are rolling over with some stocks from last year. So we are okay, and if the short rains do well, the only time probably we'll see any pinch will be late around April next year. Right now, the challenge that we see in some of the ASAL counties is a challenge of drought, so it's a challenge of water. It's not a challenge of food. And the government is really working very hard to address the challenge of water by busing water to those areas, although we have many programs that are geared towards making these areas also water secure for the long term by investing in resilient systems.
All right, thanks for that. Let me bring Professor Onyango into this. According to Professor Boga, we are okay and the country does have enough food, but no doubt the COVID-19 pandemic has had an impact on food and access to markets as well. Do you agree with what he has just said? And from your perspective, what is the status of our people's health? Because a healthy nation means people are well fed and they get the right nutrients as well.
Thank you, Smithy, and thank you for inviting me. I mean, this is the first time I've been in the studio for over 2 years, and Professor Boga and I are good friends, and I've been in this field working on these issues locally, regionally, nationally, and also internationally. And I can tell you that we have been concerned about smallholder farmers who virtually feed the world, feed Africa, feed the poor developing nations all over. And I could see from the remarks of Dr. Kalibata that we want to make farmers first. And I've had that issue before. I cannot tell you that we are food secure. If it's talking of maize, maybe maize is somewhere, it will feed us, and it has been the story all over. What Corona has shown us, that food is more than just maize, is more than just starches. And the Food System Summit that is coming has actually put nutrition at the forefront. So it's the quality of that food in terms of nutrients, the quality of that food in terms of safety. And by the way, we are doing a program on the right to food in Vihiga County, which is not ASAL area. We have vulnerable people, there are people who are very hungry, and so we really have to do something differently. And yes, Prof. Boga, you know, I respect you so much, but please, we have to do better than just talk. And I'm afraid that we are going to continue just talking.
All right, just briefly, Professor Boga, I'll give you the right to reply to that because a stark difference in the response as to whether we are food secure or not. Your comment briefly.
Yeah, you know, we use the food balance sheet to measure, and we know the population that we have, and we know how much it consumes of each commodity. And the way you balance the food balance sheet is you look at what is out in the field, what is out in the stores with farmers, what is out with the processors, and what is being imported. The totality of the whole will make sure that if I want to buy a packet of maize, of flour, I can get it. If I want to buy a packet of rice, I can get it. If I want to buy a packet of milk, I can get it. and at an affordable price. And we are there. We are not in a crisis.
Okay, you also bring up the issue of affordability and say that we're okay and things are at an affordable price. I do think some of my guests will disagree with you. Let me bring in Professor Ogendo, because there are serious challenges that our small-scale farmers hold. Can you be specific and tell us what these challenges are here in Kenya?
Thank you, Smithy, and I would also want to appreciate the presence of the peers. One, so it might be like that COVID go back home to the farms, and especially those times when we had lockdowns, people were basically in their homes and they were tending to their crops, and therefore would expect some food to be around. Now, something that needs to be addressed, which I think is very critical, is for how long you expect the food that people were able to put in effort on, especially during the lockdowns. Secondly, as talked, something very critical, which is a major challenge, and especially when we talk about resilience in our systems, water is critical. I know the country has made a lot of investments, especially in other sectors like oil. It is high time, and that is my take, that the government and the continent puts a lot of emphasis and investment into having water systems that will assure that everywhere you go, you are able to translate those environments into productive zones for the countries we are talking about, and more so Kenya. The PS has highlighted that we have got areas in this country that have not had rainfall for a long time. And these zones are basically deficient zones, and you cannot say that these people are assured of putting food on the table. I don't know maybe what the government has in place to ensure that they are cushioned to the extent that they have got sufficient resources to be able to also purchase, just like you are saying, the flour could be on the shelves, but the locals are not able to raise what it requires at the household level, be able to purchase this commodity. Now, the other challenge that I think needs to be addressed, and maybe the government has made strides on this, climate change is real. And I think for a long time, we have been toying with the idea of climate change, climate variability. Whichever terminology you choose, we need to acknowledge that it is real and it's not going to go away, that we will not wish it away.
Right.
Now, in the light of climate change, what is it that we are doing that makes us able to adapt?
Right,
and be able.
Professor Ogendo, allow me to interject there, because we will come to the issue of climate change in just a moment later on in this broadcast. But you have mentioned some of the key challenges that small-scale farmers here face. The lack of enough water, that of course leads to perhaps poor soil fertility, and other issues such as lack of access to markets and the use of perhaps traditional crop varieties and the need to change that. But also, I want to focus on the issue of affordability and cost, because right now, particularly during this COVID-19 pandemic, there have been shocks across countries when it comes to economies, and the cost of food and inflation has gone up in many countries. Dr. Nega, how can we cushion our farmers from these inflated food costs, and how can we support them? But just before you answer that, I want to ask you if you agree or disagree with the PS when he says that right now things are affordable for Kenyans when it comes to food.
So when we talk about the impact of COVID on food prices, the effects are variable. First of all, we have to understand some commodities are domestically traded and consumed by domestic consumers. Some are exported commodities. So the impact on farmers has been variable. For instance, in Kenya and many other countries, as a result of the closure of restaurants, hotels, some value chains have been disrupted, such as fresh produce, and also beef and poultry, the demand has fallen, and the impact of this fall in demand as a closure of these, businesses has badly impacted smallholder farmers. So the price of these commodities has collapsed. In some cases, farmers have to dump some of their produce because there was no adequate demand. And the same has happened during the early stages of the COVID pandemic, when a number of countries in Europe, United States, and Asia had to close, and also people were impacted. So they were not able to purchase some of the export commodities from Africa. So these commodities and also the others, staple food crops, the impact on prices has been quite variable. In addition to that, there was a lot of activities of hoarding by consumers and panic buying at the beginning of the pandemic that has led to increase in market prices of commodities. So it has affected consumers, but at the same time, maybe it has been also, good for the smallholder farmers. But there are a number of factors also contributing to increased food prices. Transport was disrupted because of lack of shortages of transportation, as well as labor to load and unload commodities. The prices of logistics has increased, and that has been transmitted into higher market prices to consumers. So when we talk about impacts of COVID on food prices, first of all, we have to distinguish between farmers as well as the different commodity value chains. So it's not the same impact everywhere.
Okay. All right. Thanks so much for that. And we'll get a response from the PS in a moment. But at this point, we do need to take a quick break on the Nation Leadership Forum. Please do stay with us because we'll be back in just a moment. The conversation continues. me on air here on this screen. Can you change it and put this back to... I hope that wasn't a joke, because we have very important guests here who don't find it funny. Tell me how much I have for part 2, please, when we come back. Hi everyone that's joined us on Zoom. This is Smriti Vidyarthi. I hope you're all well and thanks for being with us. This is just to let you know that we're still on a break, but we'll be back shortly. Please feel free to send in your questions or comments. You can tweet me, follow me on Twitter at Smriti Vidyarthi or at NTV Kenya, or in the chat box you can post your question and my director will pass it on to me. And when we go live, you can all enable your videos, or you can do so now, but keep muted. And I'll mention that you are joining us live, so you'll be on TV, so feel free to do that. Thank you, and we'll talk later. Hi there and welcome back to the Nation Leadership Forum, where today we are talking about how to build resilience among our small scale farmers in the country and how to build on food security. Remember, you can join the conversation using the hashtag NMG Leadership Forum, and you can tweet me at Smriti Vidyarthi. And we have a number of you already logged on to Zoom as we are live on our social media platforms. There you go. Great to see so many of you. Please do feel free to send in your questions or comments via the chat box, or like I said, you can tweet me and we'll sample some of them shortly. All right, so my conversation now continues with my guests, and we'll pick it up from where we left off, and that was on the issue of the cost of food. And I'll therefore throw the question to Professor Boga. What is Kenya doing to ensure that our food prices remain affordable?
Yeah, I think Kenya has one of the highest cost in the continent, because the average family spends about 45% of their budget on food. And I think this is a factor of production and productivity, in the sense that our production costs are still very high. And so as a government, we find that our farmers, instead of producing 12 metric tons per hectare for maize, they are doing around 2. So our efforts as a government is to support the farmer to improve on their productivity.
And how are you doing that?
it's not an easy task, because usually the way you increase productivity is either through genetics. So we have very strong seed companies that are, like Kenya Seed is the strongest in the East African region. But I think the biggest challenge that we have is the challenge of the soil. The average farmer does not do soil testing, so we are educating farmers first to test their soils, so that before they buy any fertilizer, they test their soil so that they can use the right type of fertilizer. So the trick is to have the right seed, the right fertilizer, and the right agronomic practices. And in the ministry, we have what we call the National Value Chain Support Program, which is supported by the National Treasury through the ministry, which is giving smart support to the farmers. Right now, we are shifting from the original system where people used to distribute fertilizer, because it was leading to problems of soil acidity, and also the system was inefficient. We hope through this system, which is done smartly through e-voucher, where the farmer receives the support from government through their phone on a voucher, and they can walk to the nearest agrovet, which is 4 kilometers away, compared to the past where they had to go to the nearest NCPB depot, which is 40 kilometers away. We are working with the farmers to make sure that they cut on their costs, and that will bring down the cost of food. But it's not an event, it's a process, it's a cultural shift that we are bringing to our farmers and also to ourselves as policy makers. And we are working very closely with the county governments to make sure that there is this transition around the issue of input support, because around the input system, that is where most of the costs are. And also we are working with farmers by providing them with stores and storage facilities so that we cut on post-harvest losses, because we lose about 30% of our produce through post-harvest losses, because most of our smallholder farmers do not have the infrastructure for storing some of their produce. But through some of our programs, we are also providing that. And our counterparts in the counties are also doing as much. And we are seeing results, although sometimes we can be skeptical about our systems. But when I came into the ministry, for example, maize, we were doing about 38 million bags. Right now, even in this year, in last year when the rain was problematic, we did 44 million bags. And our agriculture sector transformation growth strategy is geared towards growth in all these areas, while carrying the smallholder farmers along with us, because they are the most vulnerable.
Okay, let me bring in Professor Ogendo. And Professor brought up the issue of value chains. How is it that we can boost our value chains to support the small-scale farmers? And also, when we talk about value chains, information becomes a really key point as well. We need to ensure that our farmers are well informed. The issue of, post-harvest loss, for example, was brought up. It's one thing for a farmer to harvest, but they need to have the knowledge to know what next. So let's talk about the importance of value chains and also information.
Thank you, Smithy. I think I'll start by maybe responding a little bit to what the PS has alluded to. The policy environment in this country needs to be looked into, especially in the context of the regional integration. If you watch the movements of maybe grains across the borders, there's a lot of movement of grains from either from Tanzania or Uganda into Kenya. And that one tells you that our neighbors are actually having policies that enable the production system to be cost effective, and therefore they're producing at much lower cost level, have what we call a comparative advantage to produce some of the commodities. And that's why maize is coming all the way from Uganda and Tanzania into Kenya. Now, coming to the issues of harvest, before I come to the value chain, we need to contextualize that as we are talking today, smallholder farmer and the kind of the storage systems that are supposed to having in place, it's not the same farmer that we had 20 years ago. The bulk of the storage has moved into people's living rooms, which are not well designed to cater for quality storage of the products that we are talking about. So there should be a policy that actually casts our targeting of the post-harvest system, ensure that we can actually educate and bring the farmers to the level of translating what they have as their living room into acceptable storage systems. Now, when we come to the value chains approach recognizes the fact that you start all the way from input systems, production, up to the point where a commodity is on the table. Now, each of the nodes in the value chain needs to be appropriately enabled to ensure that each of the players are able to reap the benefits that go with value chain approach developing the commodities. For example, if we take a commodity like maize, we expect that we have got enablers in terms of the input distribution system and the costing that allows the farming communities to access inputs at a much lower prices. And there's also an enabling environment that allows them to access machinery, small level machinery that will allow them to do quality preparation of their land and actually other processes after the crop is planted. Now, we need to have a very robust, what you call an agriculture extension system that has got the right package in terms of information delivery, the farming community, and this should actually be enabled to also digital systems that will enable the farmers access information at the right time, up to including how to access markets.
Right.
Now, the issue of value addition is very critical. You produce, but when you remain at the raw production point without translating those products into some high-value products, you'll end up getting very little. But the people who are involved in value addition will be reaping the bigger chunk of the benefits.
All right, thanks very much for that. Professor Onyango, I'll bring you in now. And of course, a productive food supply is a great thing, but key in that production chain is a safe food supply. How safe is our food here in Kenya? And are our farmers informed enough and are they supported enough to ensure that they practice in a safe way and produce safe food?
Before I go to that, let me just talk about affordability and to say that we are not taking full advantage of the East African region. Food is the most traded commodity. Tanzania will grow more maize, they can eat, it can come to Kenya, no problem with that. It's a law of supply and demand. There are many things we send to Tanzania. You know, we have this trading region that we have, you know, we can really make full use of it. You know, we have laws that govern that, but you find trucks are stuck at the port. They have chickens which are rotting away, things which are perishable. Food is perishable. So we have non-tariff regulations, behaviors, non-tariff behaviors, and then we have tariff. The tariff ones are really great, but something is just wrong with us called human beings. And so then it brings us then to the food safety. So if food is highly perishable, it is sitting in big trucks at the borders which are supposed to be opened, by the way. It will help us much better. The food is not going to be safe. Food is safe. Food is good for us when it is safe, but it is poison when it is actually not safe. That is one thing, food going bad. And Professor Boga talked about how much wastage we have because of poor storage systems. But at the same time, we become a dumping ground. During Corona, imagine, we went back to our own foods. I now saw people looking up for their own foods, even in the supermarket. There are a lot of ndumas around now, and sweet potatoes and cassava and so on. But now that things are open, we are seeing imported foods which we can produce. Do we have to get garlic from overseas, onions from elsewhere? Can we grow that, for goodness sake? So that then makes the whole thing just more expensive even for Kenyan farmers, and our farmers are not going to benefit. Yes, trading is good, but let's do it in a way that it is give and take. So the other thing is When we now go, we are going organic. And I got my young person program officer to bring in, you know, what we call mbolea, you know, this manure that we put in the foods, and we then get it from different places. You have some of it with heavy metals. It gets into those crops. We eat it as heavy metals. Some food is grown in sewage, and you know vegetables, we don't cook them very well. We actually get foodborne illnesses, waterborne illnesses. Food safety is absolutely critical, and I think Africa has identified food safety as something they must take on as we even talk about the supply of food, but also nutritious food. Because when it makes us sick, we are also wasting it. So it is absolutely critical. We have issues of toxin with maize. And Professor Boga will tell you we have a blending policy now. You've seen now in the supermarket there's flour mixed with, you know, maize, sorghum, cassava, and so on. It reduces the amount of maize then we put in our flour. And we don't have to be completely dependent on flour, of maize flour, because there are other starches as well. So the safety aspect for me goes hand in hand with the kind of food then we eat. Yeah.
Right. All right, thanks for that. Dr. Nega, I'll bring you in, and I'd be curious to know how we can draw comparisons between Ethiopia and either Kenya or Ethiopia and the region as a whole in terms of food security. We do know, we've seen in the news that there are regions in Ethiopia that are in a food crisis, and they're experiencing famine almost. But what lessons can we learn? I'd really be interested to know what things are like in Ethiopia in some regards. I know that's a broad question, but where you can draw comparisons.
Well, when we talk about Ethiopia, the Ethiopian government has been investing in agriculture heavily from the early 90s. It has built a very robust publicly funded extension system. It has been promoting improved varieties of seeds, fertilizer, as well as agronomic practices through the extension system. Now, compared to the region, Ethiopia, for instance, if we look at maize, the average productivity is about 4 tons per hectare, which is quite high. In some cases, for instance, where AGRA has been investing in promoting the maize value chain, we have had farmers producing an average of 7.7 tons per hectare, for instance, in one region. But when the fact that you have more productivity and production does not mean everybody has access to food. When we talk about food security, it is about access, it is about affordability, it is about people having the means to buy the food. Now, the recent crisis that you hear about in Ethiopia is not related to food production. It is caused by, political crisis that's happening in the country right now, but it does not have to do with production or basically it's a disruption of agricultural markets. So one of the things that actually made this possible was one, government commitment to agriculture, putting, a substantial percentage of the government budget to the sector, as well as putting agriculture as an engine of growth for the economy to create jobs, and putting the right policies as well as programs and properly executing them. And one of the things that also keeps Ethiopia perhaps apart from other countries is it has put an agency called Agricultural Transformation Agency, which is dedicated to identifying the systemic bottleneck in the agriculture sector, develop solution, execute, as well as monitor and evaluate. So this has been a quite successful program, which probably, depending on the circumstances, can be emulated by other countries.
Right. All right. Thank you. Always interesting to be able to compare to some of our neighbors in the region. All right. At this point, I want to bring up a video. The issue of climate change has come up, and there is a video now by the head of Resilience, Climate Change and Soil Health at AGRA, that is by Dr. Tilahun Amede. Let's listen into that and then we'll continue with the conversation.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. You know, the African continent is exposed to multiple challenges, and one of the major challenges is climate change. And climate change is expressed in multiple ways, and it is, you know, the extreme droughts, the floods, the storms, the new pests and diseases. Now, all sorts of really challenges which are new to the continent. They are either new or the frequency and the intensity has increased. And this is the time really we cannot continue with what we are doing, and we cannot continue with the way we are doing things. And that is why we talk about, you know, in the continent, in the countries, about climate change adaptation. Climate change is happening partly because of our own engagements. We have been deforesting our landscapes. You know, we have been, you know, expanding more of monocropping, one crop systems. And our farmers were also not adjusting and adapting to climate change. So, you know, climate change adaptation is about being a good farmer. So a good farmer would adapt really all the climate smart agricultural practices, which means, you know, diversifying the crops, diversifying the livestock types, you know, using the right agronomic practices, bringing trees, which are fruit trees, which are multi-purpose trees in the farms, but also recycling some of the resources, you know, saving water, storing water, using it efficiently, but also, you know, making all sorts of compost from household refusals to go back to the farm and restoring the degraded lands. You know, farmers really need also some immediate support and incentives to adapt some of these technologies. It could be, for example, through carbon financing, climate financing. It could be through value addition. It could be by linking farmers to markets or adding value to what they're doing. For example, if you plant trees will take 5-10 years, yeah? But if you hang some, you know, beehives so that farmers can harvest honey, then they will protect the forest because it will be the feed of the bees, but also get benefit and sustainably manage it. I think the other thing we need to do is help farmers to get access to the right technologies, to the right seeds, to the right agronomic practices, you know, which is context specific and fitting to their own systems and aligning with their traditional knowledge so that, you know, whatever we do is not completely new to them, which means, you know, it calls for a collective action and an engagement, an investment by government and by global bodies, so that our systems are, you know, becoming green, our, you know, soils are protected, our water is conserved, but also the communities when such events are happening have the potential to adapt to it, to respond to it positively and pass without really being challenged. And we cannot address climate change, you know, challenges by not, you know, by passing agriculture. So the solutions for climate change adaptation and mitigation is closely linked to agriculture in Africa. So that's the implication, is that, you know, we need to support our farmers, is that our governments should also invest more in agricultural systems, particularly in adaptation to climate change and to climate variability.
All right, speaking there was Dr. Tilahun Amede, the head of Resilience of Climate Change and Soil Health at AGRA, basically giving us insights into the situation. But Dr. Nega, I want to bring you in again. I mean, you have, of course, a background in research in agriculture, and I'd be curious to know, how have things changed for the worse with regard to climate change? How has climate change affected practices, affected soils and livestock and natural resources as well? Paint a picture for us.
Yeah. So when we talk about agriculture and climate change, as Dr. Kalibata said during her introductory remark, agriculture is also a contributor to climate change. You know, there are a lot of greenhouse gas emissions from agriculture sector, but agriculture also holds a lot of promise, you know, in sequestration of carbon, as well as, you know, preventing some of the damages that happen in the environment. So the impact of the sector, the impact of climate change on agriculture has been one in terms of erratic rainfall. So the magnitude as well as the distribution of the rainfall has been quite disrupted, in some cases shortening the growing season. So that calls for, you know, developing new varieties which are more drought tolerant, which are more short duration, but also, you know, the number of pests and diseases has also multiplied. Now, in the recent years, we have seen increase of the fall armyworm, as well as locusts affecting the entire East African region, you know, destroying farmers' crops worth millions of dollars. So the impact has been quite substantial in terms of, you know, droughts, as well as floods, the rainfall patterns and diseases and pests. So these are the major challenges the continent is facing. But at the same time, we are also seeing a demand for food from increased population, from urbanization, from increased incomes. So we are in a very difficult situation about, you know, increasing the supply of food at the same time, and our ability to produce more food is being curtailed by the impacts of climate change.
Right, thanks very much. So in light of the climate change threat and the various challenges that have been mentioned, Professor Boga, what policies and frameworks are in place or still need to be implemented to ensure stability, productivity, and also resilience?
Thank you very much. Our policies in the Ministry of Agriculture are alive to the reality of the fact that there are certain factors that affect agriculture negatively. So the strategy that we have has three anchors. The first anchor is, of course, an inclusion anchor, which makes sure that the smallholder farmers are not left behind. And the second anchor is a growth anchor, where we bring in large-scale farms and also agro-processing. Large-scale farms are able to cope better because they have a knowledge base that enables them to adapt to the issues of climate change. And they can also provide markets for the smallholder farmers, especially if they are linked with agro-processing. But the last anchor that we have is an anchor on resilience. We have specific pillars that are alive to the fact that we must prepare for droughts, we must prepare for pests, we must prepare for pandemics. Even a pandemic like the COVID pandemic requires resilient systems for us to be able to cope. And our system has coped. But within the ministry, we have shifted most of our programs. So most of our support has a resilient component. So we have programs like the Kenya Climate Smart Agriculture Project, which is in 24 counties. We have the Drought Resilience Support Program supported by FDB. We have CVAP. So you see most of our programs have shifted because we recognize the fact that there are issues to do with climate and we must help our farmers to cope. And these programs are long-term, almost 5 years. Most of them are ending 2023. And we are conceiving new ones to be able to have dynamic systems. But the most important thing is that we have to support the farmer to be able to adapt.
Right.
And for that, they need a strong knowledge base. And the ministry also, through this strategy that we have talked about, has brought in what is known as the big data platform, which is sitting in Calro, to collect agro-weather information, which is important for the farmer to be able to adapt. And you can get it on your app. We have the Kenya Agricultural Observatory platform, where you can get agro-weather data. You can't build a resilient system if you don't have information about the weather itself.
Yeah, all right. All right, I'm afraid I've got to interject because we need to take a break at this point, but we will keep up that conversation when we return. Stay with us. You're watching the Nation Leadership Forum. More in a moment.
NTV News headlines in association with ABSA. NTV News headline. NTV News headlines in association with ABSA.
Tonight, a primary school at the Murang'a-Kirinyaga border closed as 33 pupils contract COVID-19. Murang'a's situation is getting dire.
We have had 2 areas where the spike has been very high. We've already lost 7 people there.
I associate this with not only to political gatherings, but also to the weather.
Africa has lost 6,400 people to the disease in the past week alone, as Tanzania further embraces the COVID reality.
We have resolved cross-border issues that involve citizens of both countries, such as transport, COVID-19 testing,
and protests over the slain Ndwiga brothers in Embu turned fatal. The family is dealing with the double tragedy.
Ben ndiye alikuwa kijana yangu kama ya mkono. Emmanuel naye ndiye anapikanga sana.
The police narrative contradicts the autopsy report and eyewitness accounts.
Nilisikia msee amepigwa as in hiyo sound ya kistafu kimepiga msee as in hard.
Police Oversight Authority begins probe as Police IG orders the same. Also tonight, the hustler movement is moving on and soon officially moving out.
People make choices at the opportune moment when they think different choices are necessary.
The hustlers' unity seems to be facing hassles and hurdles. PEP leader Moses Kuria conspicuously missing in action.
PEP, who is a hustler from the hustler nation, is here and is part of our PG.
Uganda distances itself from DP Ruto's travel plan. Plus, another delay in the 791 million shilling NYS scandal case, all because of former Devolution Cabinet Secretary Anne Waiguru. We tell you why.
NTV News headlines in association with ABSA.
Manage your card from your phone 24/7. Freeze and unfreeze lost or stolen cards. Manage your limit and change your PIN on the ABSA mobile banking app. Another digital innovation that gets things done. That's Africanacity. That's ABSA.
Yeah? When are we coming back? Oh my gosh. And then how long do we have? $51. That's not possible. It's not possible. It's not possible. Okay. So we won't have much time when we come back. So what I'm going to do is I'll ask each of you just one question linked to solutions. Then there's a short video we need to play that's sort of a declaration by some of the farmers who were on the earlier panel. So we'll play the video, I'll just allude to it a little bit, and then I'll just ask you to respond to that. Can I speak to my other two guests? Dr. Nega and Professor Ogendo, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hearing you.
All right, so I just want to let you know that we're almost out of time, unfortunately. Time really does fly. So when we come back, I'm afraid I'm just going to be able to ask each of you one question. I'll just be able to ask each of you one question when we come back. And then we'll have to wrap up, because I also need to just read some feedback from social media as well.
That's okay.
Okay, so if you can everybody, do your best to just keep your responses a little bit tight or short, just so we allow everybody to speak. Yeah. Okay.
Nice.
Welcome back, and our conversation continues. And now we're going to gear the chat to solutions, because we're almost out of time. And Professor Onyango, it seems that farming is associated with an older population, but we are now seeing a lot of young people getting interested in farming. And this, of course, means more job creation as well. Tell us how important this is, and also what you're doing in this sphere of encouraging young people to be farmers.
Yeah, thank you. Actually, potentially, farming, agriculture is the biggest employer we have, because everybody eats. And now with the new technologies, young people are really interested in this. And you saw during Corona, young people who are working, daily wages, hand to mouth, sometimes they don't have income. They were saying, we need to work because we have to feed our families. They were talking about feeding their families, not using that money for anything else. And then we also saw that when it opened up, like Professor Boga said, actually I remember now, matatus were being turned into food vehicles. They were getting food from those areas which are growing, and then, it's just exciting. So when we use technologies, young people will go in. It doesn't have to be old people anymore. And personally, I look forward to a young population, a young African population that says, we are ashamed to be hungry. We are ashamed to see malnourished African children, because when they are healthy, they look beautiful. And we are going to do something about this. So I think the time is now for us to facilitate them. And it, not just by word of mouth. Resources. There are going to be a lot of pledges at this summit, by the way, like always. Governments, even when we talk of smallholder farmers, making them fast, it is not just empty words. They need resources. They need money. They need information. And we have seen what smallholder farmers can do on small plots, what young people can do on very small plots, or they can play a role along the value chains that Dr. Ogendo, for example, was talking about. So I see this as really great, and I believe that we can do better. And I want to appeal that as we go forward, no more just talk. It has to be resources called money. Money speaks, and money will do anything, and those smallholder farmers will feed us, or else they go on strike for just a week, and we are all dead. Yeah.
All right, thanks so much for that contribution. Dr. Nega, how critical is it that governments invest in research, technology, and also digitization in this digital age when it comes to farming and agriculture and the sector as a whole?
So the topic of our discussion is, of course, resilience of agriculture. So when we talk about resilience of the sector, it means so many things. First of all, the traditional way of increasing agricultural production and productivity, is having some, negative environmental impacts in terms of soil degradation, in terms of depletion of groundwater, pollution of water. So in order to sustain our ability to produce more food in the future, we have to adapt, environmentally sustainable practices. We have to generate new technologies. We have to also build systems whereby these technologies are delivered to farmers. We have to have a system where farmers are able to buy these available technologies and adapt them by making finance available. Markets have to work because markets are the mechanisms that send signal to farmers what to produce, when to produce, how much, where to sell. So the markets have to be functioning. So government plays a critical role in terms of supporting, the environment for generation of technologies, as well as building the systems by which these technologies and knowledge is transmitted to farmers. It has to create the enabling environment for agribusinesses to invest. So it has to be a very holistic approach by smallholder farmers, the private sector, as well as government and the public sector in general.
Right, yeah, and the role of the private sector in this industry is, of course, very key as well. But still on solutions, Professor Ogendo, now the Egerton University has come up with something, the Kenya Extension Plus program that aims to sort of revitalize and also enhance capacity. Tell us a little bit more about that.
So thank you, Smithy. Now, if I could borrow very briefly from Vision 2030 spirit, there are 4 pillars, the vision. One of the pillars, which is the first pillar, is the enablers pillar. And within that pillar is where the human capital development is nested. And it is acknowledged that for all these other things we are talking about to work, we must invest appropriately and enhance the capacity of the human capital that we have. Now, address this and enable the government actually come up with a program that is going to revitalize and enhance the capacity of our extension service. Egerton University, working in collaboration with the Ministry of Agriculture, came up with the Kenya Extension Plus program. Now, this program puts the farmer at the center and enhancing the capacity of the farmer and the extension agents at the center. And I believe the PS is in this house, and they would wish to see a lot of things like what we are discussing move forward with speed. Now, in addition to this, it's important that as a country and the region, we embrace sustainable agricultural intensification in the frame of ensuring that we increase productivity in a sustainable manner. Whatever we put forward for the farming community should be ecologically sound and actually going to be finally beneficial money in the pockets of the farmer. I'll leave it at that.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thanks so much. Well, there is some feedback from farmers. Some East African farmers, based on the discussions, have put together a declaration signed by some participating farmers in the earlier forum on the Nation Leadership Forum. Let's listen into that. It raises some of the challenges, but also some solutions that they are looking for. Let's listen in. Right, there you have that declaration, and I will allow PS Boga to respond to that. But of course, I had told you that you could tweet in and we would sample some of your comments. We've got a question here from Sally. Unfortunately, we don't have the time to answer it, but your concern was how effective is it to use more chemical-based farming products versus using organic farming practices for sustainability of our ecosystem? Patrick, you say we are far away from attaining food security. Being food secure is not a matter of having stocked bags of maize in silos. All Kenyans do not have access to sufficient nutritious food as per their dietary needs. RK, you say Egypt has managed to produce mangoes in large scale under irrigation systems. What prevents the government from having irrigation systems in arid and semi-arid areas? Simon, you say, in terms of food security, we are not at it, but some parts of Kenya are food sufficient and need employment of different measures to improve the agriculture sector, and that will promote food security. Joanne, you say, we are way far from declaring that Kenya is okay. Right here in the city, people are sleeping hungry. Others can only afford one meal a day. On the economic side, it's getting so expensive to buy food from the markets. What can we say about people with families? Review that data. And Kabila, you say, great discussion, but I miss the livestock component. No resilient food systems without livestock. Never forget, crops and livestock feed and nourish the world respectively. Food security is defined based on availability, quantity and quality. And then Health Pract Consulting, you say, why do we still have acute malnutrition in our arid and semi-arid counties? What can be done for more resilience and sustainable agriculture systems instead of depending on treatment for our malnourished kids? And just finally, Seth, you say the government needs to ensure water accessibility is available to most farmers. The cost of water drilling is above the reach of most farmers. So thanks so much for your contribution on the Nation Leadership Forum. I'll give the final closing remarks to PS Boga. You've heard a lot from challenges brought about from some farmers and also viewers who are watching. Overall, similar questions that we have raised in this conversation, the issue of cost being a key factor. What are your closing remarks?
I think we are doing our best as the ministry. Remember also, agriculture is now devolved, so most of the action is in the counties. In the ministry, we support them with policy and capacity building and research, of course. And recently, to address the issue of youth, we relaunched and rebranded the 4K clubs. We have almost 3-4 programs in the ministry that deal with the issues of youth. We have the Enable Youth program, which addresses the challenges that youth face as they enter into agriculture. We are re-establishing a youth unit because the average age of our farmer is 59 years old and the average age of our consumer is 17 years old. So we need to balance that, otherwise we'll have more consumers than farmers who are phasing out, and we need to recruit more farmers from the young population. And of course, all the issues that have been highlighted there, they are part of our food security system. It's not at 100% perfect. We still have 1.4 million Kenyans who are food insecure. And usually when there's a drought, they rise to about 2 million. And in the Big Four agenda of His Excellency the President, the target is to reduce that by half. We still have 27% of stunting, which we want to also reduce by half by 2022. And all our programs are geared towards that, targeting different parts of the country and working with the stakeholders. And of course, bringing in mostly the private sector. Most of the things that we want government to do, private sector can do better. And we are creating an enabling environment through regulations and our laws by improving, having regular discussions with the private sector to see where to improve the system so that we can create space for them. Just by moving out of the fertilizer program, we have seen more investments in fertilizer plants by our private sector. And as we talk with them, we'll find solutions. And we hear the pain of the average Kenyan, and we are working to make sure that that pain is addressed. But this is a a continuous exercise. It's not a one event, but it requires collaboration from all the stakeholders and from all of us. And thank you for giving us this opportunity to interact with our citizens around this very important topic. And we are open to all the ideas that can help us to improve our systems.
All right, thanks so much. Of course, you bring up that issue that we didn't get to dwell on, but the point of collaboration and working with the stakeholders, it really is a key, because it takes more than just the ministry to build Africa's resilient food systems. But as the PS has said, he hears the pain, and he says they are working to address the pain, and no doubt issues of hunger ought to be addressed, and also cost as well, as that has been a key issue. All right, I'm afraid we are out of time, but thanks so much for joining us on the Nation Leadership Forum. Of course, a special thank you to my guests who have been with me today. That is Professor Ruth Onyango, founder of the Rural Outreach Africa and publisher of Africa Journal of Food and Agriculture. Also, Dr. Nega Wubene, the country manager of Agra Ethiopia, and Professor Joshua Ogendo, the associate professor at the Faculty of Agriculture, Egerton University, and also Professor Boga, principal secretary, State Department for Agriculture Research in the Ministry of Agriculture, Livestock and Fisheries. It's been a pleasure, and thank you for joining us and contributing online. That's where we've got to close the Nation Leadership Forum tonight. I'm Smriti Vidyarthi. Do stay tuned though. The news NTV Tonight is up next with Olive Burrows. Yes, please. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Dr. Nega and Professor Ogendo, can you hear me? Oh, I can't hear them.
I can hear you.
I just want to say thank you so much for your contribution.
Thank you for having us.
I'm afraid I can't hear you, but I'll drop you both a text message.
Okay.
Oh no, I can hear you now. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. My pleasure.
Thanks a lot. Really appreciate it. Good night.
Good night. Thank you.
This oven. I will let my boss know how you feel. Thank you. Ongeza kidogo. Kidogo tu. Punguza kidogo. Hapo.